Hey, hello, and welcome everybody to another edition of the Sun Solar Panel here on YouTube and on the podcast feed. I am obviously not Tim Tompkins. I'm way too good looking for that, and
Yeah, not.
only own one pair of glasses. I'm Greg Esposito, alongside my partner in crime and my sworn enemy, Dave King. Dave, how are you, man?
Yeah, we haven't really played up the sworn enemy part in a while, have we?
We haven't. I think there's too much hate on Twitter as it is. Ours used to be fun and
Yeah,
sarcastic.
and then everyone started. Yeah,
Well, no,
exactly.
then everybody actually started being enemies on Twitter, and I think it took the fun out of it. So I guess we're kind of frenemies now. We're okay
We're
with
frenemies.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. And we have a good debate going on tonight.
I think so. And like we said, Tim not on this episode because he had to worry about his call center job so he could afford all those new glasses. But we do have a great episode, one of our quick midweek episodes. But a listener last week suggested that I give out my all-time man crush Suns
Incredible
teams.
idea.
A fantastic idea. So Dave thought, well, Greg can't have all the attention
Mm-mm.
on an episode, so I have to do one too.
Greg
So
already
Dave,
tries to take the attention on every episode, so we're still not going to let him have it.
Dave, I am so gracious.
Or you'd be and I say this in loving memory, you'd be the Kellen Olson of podcasters if you took the entire episode all by yourself.
Can I be the Kellen Olson of podcasting if there's a Kellen Olson of podcasting?
Yeah, this is, I know Kellen remembers this, and luckily for him, he's had partners for the last few years, but he went through a year on Locked On Suns where he was alone half the time because he couldn't hook up timing with Eddie House. And the dude, I mean, you could hear him like taking drinks halfway through to try to wet the whistle.
Dave and I are good at hooking up with each other, so you've got us today
Hey
on the
man, you got
show.
to hook up with someone.
This is very true. So
And you're
Dave,
married, so you know you.
I told you this was going to go off the rails without Tim. But Dave, I'm such a gracious host that I'm going to say, why don't you start out? I think we go position by position on these teams. And let's start with the point guard position. Dave, who is your man crush starting point guard on your team?
Oh man. Okay. So we shared our lists before the podcast started, and I don't think it's fair that we both have the same point guard. So while I'm just going to defer to Greg on the man crush point guard, but then I'll give my reasons why that person would be my man crush. I'm going to give a different one, and I'm just going to be all weird. I'm going to go all the way back to when I first moved to the Valley in the 80s. And very few people will remember this guy. But back in the day, before the Suns got good again, they had a point guard named Kyle Macy. Yes, exactly. And for some reason, of course, we had just the newspaper back then. So I would pull out the sports section in the mornings. I would read the sports section before going to work. Not going to work at the time. I was going to high school. And I would read the sports section and on weekends as well. And there'd be stories on the Suns. And back then they did not have very good players in the early 80s. They had, of course, Sweet D and I think maybe Larry Nance joined within a year or two. But Kyle Macy, for some reason, I identified with as an under athletic, try hard point guard. So I'll do that. But then we're going to lead into my real man crush, which is Greg's alter ego.
Hold on a second. You picked Kyle Macy and you wonder why he was the guy that you connected with. He was the only thing whiter than the cocaine on that 80s team, all right?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying not to be a whitest or anything like that on here, but
a
whitest. But for some reason, I did connect. I mean, I did love Kevin Johnson, but then I found out about the real Kevin Johnson, so I don't love Kevin Johnson anymore. It's too easy to say Steve Nash. He was everybody's man crush across the globe. Yeah. So, Greg, give us your man crush. Tell us who was your point guard man crush.
My point guard man crush, and this comes as absolutely no surprise to anybody who's listened to the show or followed me for any period of time. It is Goran Dragic. All right, it's got to be Goran. Gogi was one of my favorite guys to be around when I worked for the team. Previous to that, he was one of my favorite guys to watch out there. Obviously, his 24-point quarter against the Spurs in the playoffs was unbelievable in helping that team sweep the Spurs in 2010 and kind of exercise those demons. But getting to know Goran was, they say don't get close to players. You're not supposed to do that, but it was a true pleasure to get to know Goran in my time with the team. He was one of the only guys that ever would walk by and ask, "How's your family? How are you doing, Greg?" Like have a genuine conversation with you. So it is tough for me not to man crush on Goran Dragic.
Yeah, man, my first year covering the team was the year that Goran came back the second time. And I remember my first media day, Goran was like, yeah, sure, we can make the playoffs. Why not? He was all excited about coming back. And that season and the season after and half the season after that, he was my go-to guy in the locker room. He was most people's go-to guy in the locker room because he's always willing to talk. But what I really liked about him is he was willing to keep talking to you after the cameras turned off and after the recorders turned off and just catch up with you, like Greg says, to ask how your family's doing and all that. And just talk. We'd talk basketball. We'd talk about the team. We'd talk about players and stuff like that. But he would know that it was off camera, off recorder. And he was really cool about it. And then after he had his little meltdown, which to this day I felt like a girlfriend broke up with me or something like that. When he had his little meltdown, he went away for the 9-day All-Star break. Then all of a sudden he demanded to be traded and all that. I don't know, was Rich Paul his agent? But anyway, he demanded to be traded. He left. When he came back the next year, I saw him walking down the hall. He came back with the Miami Heat for a road game. And I saw him walking down the hall and he's like, "Hey Dave, how's it going? How are things going with you?" And just the nicest dude ever. So yes, that's my second man crush.
Yeah. I mean, I remember he was playing for the Slovenian national team one summer in Eurobasket. And we asked, "Hey, can we do an interview with you for Suns.com? We'd love to catch up with you." He's like, "Oh yeah, no problem, Espo. Here's my Skype name. Skype me." Well, we Skype him, and it's like the middle of the night. He's sitting on his bed. Zoran's in the bed next to him in this hotel room, like just totally chill. Like, "Oh, what's up, man?
Hey, how's it going? How's it going?"
And I remember when he came back, and I ran into him, and I asked him, "How are things doing?" "Oh, good. My wife's finally liking it." And I go, "Well, she has 97 million reasons to like it in Miami, huh?" And it was one of those moments I'm like, did I really just make that joke to a professional basketball player? And he was cool about it, at least.
Of course he was. All right, let's move on to the next position. You go first this time.
Oh no, Dave, I'm going to let you continue to go.
No, let's alternate. Go ahead.
I'm that.
I want you to own this one. Go.
Oh, you want me to own this one? Well, I'm going to look down at my notes because I just want to make sure that I'm not stealing your guy. But
you're not stealing my guy,
because I think I'm the only man in the world that has a man crush on this next gentleman. Is Marko Milic. That's right. I have two
shooting guard. Marko Milic.
I am the only human on earth that has a man crush on two Slovenian NBA players, and they're not Goran and Luka. It's Goran and Marko. All right, Marko Milic. I remember late 90s, I believe it was 1997, right? Internet just becoming a thing. Welcome to the old man get off my lawn corner. But internet just becoming a real thing. NBA teams.
Yes, it was the dial-up years.
Yep, and teams were just getting their own websites. The NBA was starting to embrace that. And I remember seeing an article, that this guy was coming to the Phoenix Suns. This guy named Marko Milic, who they got from, I believe they acquired his rights from Philly. He was a Slovenian guy, and there was this grainy, tiny video that you could watch, and it was him in a dunk contest from overseas where he's the original Blake Griffin. He jumped over a car. It was a green
Honda copy of Marko Milic. Yep.
Yeah, and the difference was it was a convertible that he jumped over, so it was more clearance. But still, jumped over it, dunked, and I forever had an obsession with this guy. Now, he lasted all of he was here for part of 2 seasons. I think he played in 44 games. Didn't do much of anything. But I remember that video, and there's this great picture that I tweeted out a couple of weeks ago with no no reason to it, of Marco laying there on the court with a basketball and the giant Suns 90s logo there in the Sunburst uniform. And I've forever since made it my mission to find a Marco Milic jersey. So he is my starting.
Have you found one?
I have not. I almost paid to have one.
Listeners, this dude needs to know where to get a Marco Milic jersey. Don't get Greg one. Just tell him where to find it.
There are two jerseys in my holy grail of jerseys: Marco Milic, and then a Tom Tupa Phoenix Suns jersey. Those are my holy grails.
Tom Tupa Phoenix Suns.
I mean, Arizona Cardinals, Phoenix Cardinals.
Oh, got it. All right. Yeah, almost the same thing. He did play multiple positions.
If you have a Tom Tupa Phoenix Suns jersey, I will pay you lots for it.
All right, let's go to my shooting guard. My shooting guard needs no explanation. He is the guy who made me fall in love with a player as much as I possibly could, but he made my wife at the time fall in love with him even harder, because as I described him to her, not as her watching him play the game of basketball, but as I described him to her, she said, "That's my guy." Of course, she said the same thing about Goran Dragic, but for very different reasons, she fell in love with this guy. My shooting guard man crush is Raja Bell. And you know why? Raja Bell.
Casey Jacobson, the way you were describing it. I thought it was
Raja Bell, man. First, he is a pretty man, for one thing. And the ladies did love little Raja. But I described him to her once. Of course, everyone remembers the clothesline on Kobe, where the entire world outside of LA fell in love with Raja Bell. But my wife before that, maybe it was after, I don't know. She was kind of a half Suns fan, half not, which is why she's no longer my wife. But no, that's not the only reason.
She's only a half Dave King fan, half.
Yeah.
Hey now.
So Raja Bell, and I described him to her. I said, he's the only guy, the only player I've followed, especially on the Phoenix Suns, who would go out there and he would get angry over a play. And the coach would know he's getting angry over a play. He might have gotten hard fouled. A teammate of his might have gotten hard fouled. He'd get the crazy eyes. His eyes would suddenly go about twice the normal size. And he'd start loping down the court. And Mike D'Antoni would look over and say, "Hey, come on. We're going to call a timeout." He's like, No, coach. I'm good. Leave me in. I'm good. I'm totally good. Don't worry about it. I'm good. And then within 5 seconds, he would just lay out the other guy on the other team, just hard foul, knock him down, and then just walk quietly to the bench without even saying a word. He's not one of those dudes who would yell at the refs after he's done the deed. He would just get back at the other team, doing it to them, and then just go sit himself down on the bench before he got a timeout for any other demonstrative action. That was a great period of time. And when I watched him do that, I told my wife, I said, he's a dude that would just with a big smile, and he would do it all with a smile on his face. With a big smile on his face, he would come up, he'd put a knife in you, and he'd twist it. And all with a smile. That was him. He would just walk down the court, and he would just give back that hard foul to the other team, and then just quietly walk to the bench and sit down, all with a smile. That's my man crush.
Dave likes assassins that stab people while smiling. Good to know. Yeah. So who's your small forward then, Dave?
All right. My small forward. Oh, yeah. My small forward is Grant Hill drinks Sprite. I mean, you can't not love Grant Hill. The dude had, he could have been a superstar on the level of Michael Jordan back in the 90s when he played for the Pistons. But then he had some free agency thing. I think after he signed with Orlando, then he got his infection and all that and nearly died. And his career was almost entirely over. His entire contract with Orlando was almost unplayed as he made over, I don't know, maybe it was $100 million. And he was on the street, ready to retire, almost out of the game. Suns signed him to a minimum contract. I'm pretty sure it was a minimum contract to play for the Suns. It might have been a couple million over, but he came in with no pretense, nothing. No, I'm bigger than this. No big head. No, nothing. He just came in and just played. He didn't even need to start. He didn't need to do anything. He turned himself into a defensive player. He became the Suns' best perimeter defensive player in the few years that he played for the Suns. And he was the perfect model citizen. I will never, ever, ever say a negative word about that guy based on what I know of him and the information I got from just watching the Suns back in those days.
Oh yeah, nothing better than Grant Hill, another all-time great guy. I remember day he announced his retirement, He had been playing with the Clippers, I believe, and he had come to the gym to work out with Aaron Nelson and the guys. He was at the arena, and I happened to be down there. I think it was draft workouts or summer league practice. One of the two were going on, and I heard he was in there. And I said to Julie Fye, the great public relations
love Julie
manager, I said, hey, would Grant be willing to talk, to us for Suns.com about retiring? And he hadn't talked to anybody. Literally, it had just come out that morning, and he said, yes, but nobody else can know I'm here. So come into the training room and you can have 10 minutes, no problem. And greatest thing. So I got a chance to sit down with him. We were the only ones to have an interview with him that day. He had no reason to even say yes, and it was just because he's that good of a guy and everything. So I agree, love Grant, but he couldn't. I went in a different direction with my man crush, and it's mostly because as a 9-year-old kid, and a 9-year-old, 10-year-old kid, I was fascinated by this guy's game and what he was able to help that the 92-93 Suns accomplish, and then totally crushed by what happened after. Richard Dumas is the small forward, the Doom Boom. That guy was an athletic freak, could do things that were way ahead of his time. He was a player that it always felt like he came from an era like today's game and got dropped in the early to mid 90s, and he couldn't beat his own personal demons. He did himself in, even though the Suns tried everything they could to put that guy in a position to succeed.
It did turn out he wasn't the same player when he wasn't on drugs,
which is just the whole thing is unfortunate. And I just so fondly remember that the 92-93 season and what he was able to do there, what he meant to that team, and what everybody thought he was going to be able to become. And I think that what if and that longing is why I still have a man crush on Richard Dumas in a certain way to this day. So that's my small forward there.
Yeah. So who is your power forward?
All right,
man crush.
Look, okay. Charles Barkley is the obvious answer because I am sitting 10 feet from a bunch of Barkley memorabilia and everything, but I felt like that's just like a cheap answer here, right? Everybody that was around in the 90s would say Charles Barkley.
Yeah, you'll notice we did not cop to Steve Nash or Charles Barkley in this episode. Thank you very much.
That's easy answers. That's not fan crush. That's just normal, rational fandom. You should like the two guys who have had MVPs in your franchise's history. But my power forward is PJ Tucker. And yes, I lean heavy on a lot of personal relationships in this because that I was lucky enough to have those. But PJ was a guy that came in, and I remember his introductory press conference. They signed him out of, I think he was playing in Germany the year before. It's the one thing Lance Blanks actually did right.
I think it was Bros Basket.
He brought him in. His PJ Tucker's introductory press conference was in a tiny conference room that's now an office at the arena because the circus was in town. No media showed up, so they had to ask, or I think there was one media member that was there, and they had to ask employees to come in here. So this guy felt like it actually meant something that he signed. He came in a V-neck white T-shirt and two pants. Like this was pretty boy PJ Tucker.
Yeah, I remember the summer league play where he wasn't a star on the summer league team, but Dan Marley just loved him. Dan Marley, an assistant coach for the Suns at the time, absolutely loved PJ Tucker. Played him a lot of minutes, and I think was one of the biggest proponents to signing him to a contract for the season.
Yeah, and he came in and he worked for everything, right? This was not a guy that was handed
the dude is still working for everything.
Oh, yeah. And he came in, he carved out a space for himself. He won over fans with his hustle. And again, another guy that I just found to be genuinely nice. We connected on a lot of things. He actually was a big Charles Barkley fan, so we connected on that in a few times when we did sit down interviews, and we just talked when when the cameras weren't on. And so I just really fell in love with his game and the person. And he was fun to give crap to because he was one of the few guys that had 2 lockers in the locker room. And it wasn't because he earned it. It wasn't because anybody actually gave him 2 lockers. He took a second locker for his shoes. All right.
Absolutely. They were stacked top to bottom.
Dude, it was nuts. And then he'd wear the craziest stuff at post game, which was always a favorite of mine during post
I
game.
used to love, and all the players are like this. So there's nothing PJ could have done about this. But after a game, you're still worked up. Your blood is still boiling. And I would always feel so bad for the guys because they would dress up for the cameras, for the post-game interview. At least some of the guys did, and PJ was one of them. And he would go to the trouble. He'd put on his nice shirt. He'd put on maybe even a tie and his jacket and all that, as if he was going to go out to an upscale club or something like that after the game. He'd put all this stuff on, and the dude, unfortunately, would still be sweating up a storm. So, you'd see the beads of sweat on the forehead, and they'd have to wipe, and he's not the only player that's been like that, but their blood is still going even after a shower after the game, even 20 minutes after the game stopped. He put all of it out on the court, and I loved him for it.
Another fun fact: he had a Ted doll, the bear from that.
He did.
In his locker for 2 seasons straight, and I couldn't love him anymore for that too. So,
and he was so happy when he'd stopped getting the Hustle Awards too.
Yep. So who is your power forward?
All right, my power forward. We haven't gotten to center. Okay, my power forward is Danny Manning. And the reason I love Danny Manning wasn't for any personal connections. It wasn't for who he actually was as a Phoenix Sun, because he was hurt a lot of the time. But he had him joining the team in 94 and 95. The Suns should have won the championship. They were the best basketball team in the entire league. Him joining those guys with Charles and KJ and Tom Chambers, although he was fading at that time, but Dan Marley and all those guys. Danny Manning was such a perfect fit, doing everything on the court, and I felt so bad for the fact that he got hurt and couldn't finish out playing well. But man, when those 94-95 seasons came and the Suns were eventually ousted by Houston, if Danny Manning was healthy, I don't think they'd have been ousted by Houston.
Yeah, I think they would have had a title if he hadn't had that knee injury when Joe Klein fell into him in practice. It wasn't even in a game. Right. It wasn't anything sexy how it happened. He just literally, his knee fell on. So like that's one of those unfortunate, another big what if in Suns history is what happens if Danny Manning doesn't get injured there.
Right. All right. Now my center, we're alternating here. My man crush center has to be Alvan Adams. And there's 2 reasons for this. One is because he was a legend already when I moved to Arizona in '83. He was a legend for the team. He had led them into that 76 playoffs. He was an all-star for many seasons. He was the original multi-talented center. I mean, everyone looks at Nikola Jokic these days. That was Alvan Adams back in the 70s. That dude was so freaking talented. But for the second reason that he is one of my favorites all time and my man crush is that he still works for the team. He still works in public relations. He still works in community relations. He is the nicest guy you'll ever see. He's still 6'9", although he may be 6'8" now, maybe 6'7". But he's getting up there in years. But he is still the very nicest guy, totally unassuming. So I guess my man crushes are about unassuming guys for the most part. And he's another one of them where he was just so talented, but he's still just a fan of today's basketball game too.
Dave, are you projecting onto people here? Is it you're unassuming guys that make it big? Is that
absolutely? Although I couldn't hold a candle to Alvan Adams with his athleticism. I couldn't hold a candle to any of these guys. These are all top 400 people in the world on athletic talent and basketball skill. So we all talk about under athletic, but it's really like of the top 0.0001%, they're not in the 0.000001%. So there's that. But yes, I probably do identify, although I will say that, so my team, to finish out my team, Goran Dragic, Raja Bell, Grant Hill, Danny Manning, and Alvan Adams, all super talented and all super unassuming. So absolutely.
I think Alvin is completely underrated because most fans didn't get a chance to see him play. I barely remember the tail end of his career, but everything I've heard is that he was a truly great big man. I mean,
He was Jokic before Jokic.
Kareem said that he was the best guy he ever played up against as a center, and that says the world to me. Alvin could pass, he could shoot. I think if he played in today's game, he probably would have 3-point range. They didn't really do that
Sure.
back then, but his
He
jumper
didn't
was
even have a 3-point line back then.
no, I mean he could rebound. Like he rookie of the year. I mean he is probably one of the most underappreciated players in Suns history when you look at it. And now as the facilities manager,
That's what he is. That's right.
he actually will wind up helping the next generation because he's overseeing this renovation as well. So he has a
good
huge impact. Fun fact: do you remember when Shaq tore down the backboard in?
Yeah.
At
When he was with the Magic, right?
Yep, at America West Arena.
Yeah.
Alvin Adams was facilities manager. It was the first year he was doing it, I believe. He had to figure out how to get a new hoop there because back then they did not have backup baskets, and they just happened to have one in the building at the time for some reason. I don't remember.
Was it on the practice court?
No, it was. There was some reason they had one in the.
They got lucky,
and they brought it out, and it became the standard to have a backup back there. And Alvin was part of that. So, so my final player on my man crush team, my center. This was a tough one because there's a lot of guys that the Suns have had a lot of
characters,
not great centers, but characters. Alvin was it one I seriously considered, but was a little too mainstream for me. Ahmed Haddadi almost made this list for me, just because he gave me my first creative moment running the team account with "Who's your Haddadi?" the hashtag, and then
oh my youngest daughter, she was about 5 at the time. Hamed was on the team. He is the tallest man ever. And it's like, yeah, he pretty much is.
and the other guy I considered Joe Klein because he was just a goofball. He was a giant, 7-foot kid that played for the team in the 90s. But in the end, I had to go with Marcin Gortat. I man crushed on this dude because he was the funniest guy ever to ever cover, to be around. Dude still talks to me to this day and gives me crap via social media. I give him major props for just how funny he was. And next to Steve Nash, he actually was a pretty great pick and roll center, was a great rebounder in those
yeah, he just didn't thunder dunk like Amari did. That's all. So people didn't like the layups instead of thunder dunks, but he was super athletic.
Oh yeah, and my favorite moment with him, had him on the original podcast I did, Suns One-on-One. He was one of my first guests, right? We go 35 minutes, and I can't use 10 of it because it's him going on a rant about Dwight Howard and how mother effer this and that and all this stuff that is gold. To this day, I wish I had kept the audio just for my own entertainment. But nobody could ever hear it.
So my favorite memory of Marcin was the Sacramento Kings were in town. And Jermaine O'Neal was the other center along with Marcin Gortat that year. It was 2012-13. And even Jared Dudley was on the team. He's like, yeah, all the exit interviews were, look, they got to get rid of us and go young. And anyway, Marcin was talking after the game, and there was a game at home against the Kings, and DeMarcus Cousins would go through phases where there were games he just didn't show up to. So he like put up, a really non impactful 20 and 10 or maybe 18 and 12 or something along that line, but non impactful. He looked like he wasn't there. And the Suns had won the game, and Marcin Gortat had almost matched him on the box score. And Marcin's like, he was like talking total crap about how he dominated DeMarcus Cousins and all this. And I could just see Jermaine O'Neal's face like 2 lockers away going, oh, no, you don't say that, man. You don't say that. It's so funny.
Oh, Marcin did not care.
Later in the season, the Kings came back to town and DeMarcus Cousins dropped like 44 and 25 or something, and nobody had to say anything. And Martin, after the game, was just like, yeah, I had it coming.
Yeah, one of my favorites. I remember one time post game, I come in. I used to wear bow ties with the team, and we were wearing almost the exact same bow tie. So he wanted a photo, so I got this great photo in the office of he and I standing next to each other, pointing at each other's bow ties, like, "What the heck? You stole my fashion!" So
Like the Spider-Man meme.
yep, exactly. It was very much.
Yeah,
Although
you and Martin are Spider-Man.
it looked more like Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger and twins, but it was fun. So that I'll throw out a an honorable mention, and I don't know how many people have noticed this in the background, but Dragan Bender is sitting on Bender Island as my sixth man of
Is
the
Bender Island still full of water?
it's
I think actually Bender Island has been moved like a mobile home to Siberia.
yeah, Bender Island is now in Russia, and I'm all for it. I'll be vacationing there shortly, so he's probably on my list. So, Dave, I think we've probably spent far too much time talking about man
You
crushes.
know what? I really think I hope that fans will enjoy this, and I hope what you guys will do is when I post this on Brightside, you guys will follow up with your own man crushes. So I'll post the two teams, the two man crush teams on Brightside later this probably tomorrow, the next day or whatever, and I'll post in the man crushes and let you guys actually have a take on that. In the meantime, I really appreciate you guys listening and tuning in tonight. Some of you were live, and some of you will be listening over time because it'll be there in perpetuity on YouTube, and you guys can leave comments underneath there and all that as well. So thank you very much for listening. And this was our man crush episode, and you know what? We could probably go 2 deep at least, if not 3 deep.
Oh, you kidding? I could build like a all-time top 50 man crush team. Make sure click if you're watching on YouTube, click the like button. Helps the algorithm. If you're listening on iTunes or Google Podcasts, leave us a review. We will. We always love that. It's always
certainly
helpful.
subscribe. You can follow any of the links underneath the posts, and we're all set up. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. And we hope you tune in again on Saturday. We'll be back with our regularly scheduled programming.
You can follow him at Dave King NBA. I'm at Espo. You can follow the show at Sun Solar Panel on Twitter. So until Saturday, we'll talk to you next time.